Settle in, wherever you are. Let the quiet hum of your surroundings fall away. The past is waiting softly, patiently just behind the veil of now. Tonight, we're drifting far from the glowing lights and hum of the modern world into a time shaped by silence, by soil, and by centuries of repetition. You're invited to walk gently into medieval England, not as a noble, not as a knight, but as a peasant. Your feet will tread paths packed by centuries of trudging labor. Your eyes will adjust to dim, smoky light inside timber-framed huts. And your ears will tune to the slow rhythms of scythes through grain, oxen trudging through furrows, and gossip murmured over weak ale. This is not the story of a single famous person or a grand moment in history. This is the story of the rhythm of ordinary life, of people forgotten in name, but familiar in experience. After that, we will ease into the troubled mind of a forgotten king, puzzle over a centuries-old mystery whispered across meadows, and glimpse the strange spectacle of noble banquets where gluttony dressed itself in silken candlelight. But for now, take a breath and picture yourself barefoot on dewy grass at dawn, under a heavy sky, with a wooden yoke across your shoulders. Welcome to the daily misery and small, stubborn joys of a medieval peasant. The day begins before the sun is fully risen. The peasant wakes not to an alarm, but to the dull clink of iron, the bleat of a restless sheep, or the groan of timbers in a damp roof overhead. The air is thick with the scent of straw, soot, and the faint tang of old turnips. There is no rush but no pause either. The rhythm has been set by the seasons, the land, and by obligation. Always obligation. The first task is fire, coaxing faint orange from last night's ashes to warm a clay mug of thin gruel. The bread, if any, is coarse and dark, more chaff than flour, the texture almost gritty between the teeth. Meat is rare, often reserved for feast days, or for when something dies of its own accord. Salted fish, turnips, and onions may round out the morning meal. Everything smells a little of damp. Then the fields, always to fields. Imagine yourself pushing a heavy wooden plow behind a tired ox, the earth clumping around the blade like wet clay. The handles chafe your hands, already calloused. Your breath fogs in the cold, and your body moves more from memory than choice. You do not own this land. The Lord does. You till it because you must. Most peasants were serfs bound to the land like trees. You could not move away, could not marry without permission, and you owed the Lord a share of everything. Grain, poultry, eggs, and time, a tithe of your Yale-Dauphin. A tenth also went to the church. And then there were the unexpected taxes, special levies for wars, for weddings, for the whims of a distant monarch. The work shifts with the seasons. In spring, it is sowing and lambing. In summer, haymaking. Autumn is harvest. Winter brings repair and waiting and the quiet dread of scarcity. Days are long, but the hunger stretches longer. There is no such thing as privacy. Huts are shared by family, by animals, by lice. The walls are wattle and daub, thin and uneven. The roof sags beneath thatch, and in wet months, the floor becomes more mud than packed earth. Smoke curls inside rather than rising cleanly from the chimney hole. Everything smells of damp, wool, unwashed bodies, and the faint sweetness of hay. Disease comes with the seasons. Dysentery, smallpox, and fevers pass easily from one thatched roof to another. Death is familiar, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow. Graves are dug shallow, marked with wood or memory. Life expectancy is short, but not always measured in years. Often, it's measured in seasons survived. Still, not every moment is grim. There are rare joys, quiet and unremarkable to the noble eye, but precious to those who live close to the soil. A warm evening shared around a fire with weak ale. A midsummer festival where ribbons hang from branches and music, crude and cheerful, drifts through the dusk There is laughter at gossip who was caught stealing eggs, whose pig got loose, who's courting whose daughter. The absurdities of village life provide the only theater most will ever know. Children play with straw dolls, kick leather balls, and are quickly put to work. Girls fetch water and tend to younger siblings. Boys herd animals or learn the rhythm of the plow. Education is rare, mostly confined to prayer or the occasional instruction from a kindly priest. Time moves not by hours, but by tasks. The cock's crow, the angle of light, the bell from the manor or the church, each told a reminder that life is not yours to plan, but to endure. At night, under a low ceiling and coarse blanket, sleep comes quickly. Muscles ache, the stomach growls, and dreams are often more generous than waking. Outside, wolves may howl. Inside, someone snores. The air is thick and still, save for the pop of embers. And so the day ends, as it always does, with fatigue, with stillness, and with the quiet knowledge that tomorrow will be the same. Now, let the plow fade into the mist. The calloused hands return to rest, and the village melts softly into shadow. We drift gently upward, from muddy fields to velvet halls, and into the fragile mind of a boy who became a king far too soon. Henry VI was not a man born for power. He was born into it when his father, Henry V, the warrior king, the conqueror of Agincourt died in 1422. Little Henry was only 9 months old, a baby with a crown far too heavy for such small brows. While he gurgled in the cradle, ministers ruled in his name. By the age of 1, he had not only inherited England, but France as well. 2 kingdoms, 2 thrones, 1 infant. From the very beginning, Henry's reign was not truly his own. Regents governed on his behalf. Alliances were forged around him, and decisions were made above his head. He was raised in the shadows of greatness and bloodshed, but not for battle, not for rule. Henry was quiet, devout, gentle in temperament. He adored books, prayer, and solitude. He was not like his father, the iron-willed soldier king. He was soft-spoken, kind-hearted, and entirely unsuited for the cruel chessboard of medieval politics. By the time he came of age and assumed control, the tides of fortune had turned. The once proud English holdings in France were beginning to unravel. Joan of Arc had inspired a French resurgence. England's grip was weakening, and Henry could not hold it together. Imagine him now, walking slowly through the stone corridors of Windsor, fingers brushing tapestries, eyes downcast. He murmurs prayers under his breath, while courtiers debate loudly nearby. He wishes to help, to bring peace. But peace requires strength, and Henry was not strong. His piata marble in private life was a weakness in the Game of Thrones. He preferred building colleges over castles, endowing churches instead of fortifying cities. His great legacy, Eton College, was meant to educate future leaders. But as he built, the realm crumbled. And then came the silence. In 1453, after years of political failure and military disaster, including the catastrophic loss of Bordeaux, the last English possession in southern France, Henry suffered a complete mental collapse. For more than a year, he did not speak. He did not move with purpose. He did not recognize his wife or acknowledge the birth of his only son. He simply withdrew. In his stead, the nobles turned on each other. The vacuum of power cracked the kingdom open like a dry nut. The Wars of the Roses began, a brutal, bitter feud between the houses of Lancaster and York. Red rose versus white, brother against brother. And at the center of it, a vacant-eyed king who barely understood what had begun. Imagine the throne, polished and regal, and utterly empty in spirit. Queen Margaret of Anjou, Henry's formidable wife, stepped into the void, fierce and politically astute. She tried to defend their son's inheritance, but the weight of dynastic chaos pressed hard. Battles flared across the countryside. Nobles shifted allegiance like reeds in the wind. Each skirmish, each betrayal, drove the crown deeper into confusion. Henry, when loose-head, tried to preach peace, But peace from a weak king is often a whisper in a storm. His moments of clarity were brief and grew fewer over time. In 1461, he was deposed. Edward IV, from the rival House of York, seized the throne. Henry fled, then was captured. He spent years in prison, treated more like a relic than a ruler. Once, he escaped. Briefly, his supporters for a flicker of time. He was king again, but flickers fade. By 1471, the struggle was over. Edward IV reclaimed power decisively. Henry, once again imprisoned, grew quieter still. On a spring night in the Tower of London, he died. Officially, it was said to be grief. Unofficially, it was likely murder. A quiet end for a quiet king. He was 49 years old. His legacy, not one of conquests or great reforms, but of loss, of the gradual, almost tender unraveling of a kingdom, and the tragedy of a man too kind for the age he lived in. Close your eyes for a moment and picture him not as a monarch, but as a fragile soul, a pale figure seated beneath stained glass, hands folded in prayer, while a world of iron and ambition marched past him. Henry VI was not a hero, nor a villain. He was, in many ways, a ghost of a king, haunted not by what he did, but by what he could not do. Let us now leave behind kings and crowns. Let the stone towers dissolve into mist, the banners fall still in the breeze, and follow the sound of whispering wind across open fields. We drift east, to the gentle countryside of Suffolk, England. The year is somewhere in the 1100s. The fields here are soft and rolling, the hedgerows dense with wild berries, and the sky pale and endless. In the heart of this sleepy countryside lies the small village of Woolpit. It is a quiet place then, as it is now. The name comes from the Old English wolf pit, the wolf pit straps dug to protect livestock from wild animals. But one day, something emerged from the pits. Something no trap had caught. Two children, a boy and a girl. Their skin was green. That is what the story says. Green as young leaves, green as gooseberry stems. They wore strange clothing, unfamiliar and cut in cloth. They spoke no recognizable language, only murmured in tones that made no sense to the startled reapers who found them. They seemed frightened, confused, and hungry, yet would eat only raw beans. Word spread quickly through the village. The children were taken to the manor house of a local landowner, Sir Richard de Callan. There, they were cared for, Fed observed. Gradually, the girl adapted. She began to learn English, and as her diet changed, her skin color slowly returned to normal. But the boy grew ill, and within a short while, he died. The girl survived, and in time offered an explanation in broken English. She told of a strange place called St. Martin's Land. There, she said, everything was green, the trees, the sky, the light. There was no sun, only twilight. Her people were Christian, she claimed, and she and her brother had been herding animals when they heard a strange sound, followed a path into a cave, and emerged here in this world. And then, the story ends. There are no other records of her life beyond a rumor that she later married a man from King Lynn and lived out her days in relative normalcy. The rest to her origins, her memory, her truth remain behind the veil. What do we make of this tale? For centuries, it has lingered in English folklore, not as a fairy tale, exactly, but not as documented history either. It exists in that soft boundary between what was seen and what was believed. Some say the children were Flemish refugees. There had been political unrest in nearby regions, and perhaps these were orphans, displaced, their language foreign, their clothes unfamiliar, and their green hue the result of prolonged malnutrition, especially from a diet lacking in iron. A medical condition known as hypochromic anemia can turn the skin a faint greenish color. Over time, with better food, this could fade, And it did. Others suggest they were abandoned children of the nearby Thetford forest. Perhaps they had lived underground in mines, or in deep woodsland. The strange tale of a green-tinted world was the confused memory of a dark, dim life below the surface. The twilight land she described may have been no more than tunnels and shade. And then, there are the more curious theories. Some speak of interdimensional travel, of the children wandering through a rift between worlds, of time slips, fairy realms, or even early alien contact. These are not ideas grounded in traditional history, but they speak to something deeper. Our ancient urge to explain the inexplicable, to believe in doors we cannot see. Why has this story lasted so long? Because it's quiet, unresolved, mysterious, but not frightening. It speaks in a soft voice. To children, a green tint, a cave, a world with no sun. Then, adaptation, one death, one life, a vanishing. There is something almost lullaby-like in its rhythm, and perhaps that is why we remember it. Not because it explains anything, but because it lingers just on the edge of understanding, like a half-remembered dream, caught between night and morning. Even now, if you visit Woolpit, you will find a sign welcoming you to the village. It bears the image of two green children, whether real, misunderstood, or imagined. They are part of the place. And so, as the fields stretch softly into twilight, and the wind stirs gently through the hedgerows, we leave behind the mystery unresolved, just as it has remained for nearly 900 years. Now let the winds of Woolpit settle, and picture yourself stepping through heavy oak doors out of the fields and fog into firelight and fragrance. You are in a great hall. The stone beneath your feet is cool. The ceilings stretch high above, lined with dark beams and fluttering banners. The air is thick with the scent of spicy and roasted meat mingling with the smoke of countless tallow candles. Laughter echoes against the stone, muffled by rushes strewn across the floor. Welcome to the banquet of the medieval elite. This is not a simple meal. It is a performance, a theater of hierarchy, politics, and excess. At the long table, the Lord of the Manor presides. He does not simply eat, he is observed. His gestures are studied, his preferences mirrored. Beside him sit honored guests, arranged not by affection, but by rank. To sit closer to the head is not just convenience, it is power. Imagine now the procession of servants, dozens of them, feet padding quietly, hands steady, shoulders tense. Some carry trencher stick slabs of stale bread used as edible plates. Others hold silver platters, each revealing a course more elaborate than the last. Roasted swan, glazed boar's head, peacock, its feathers reattached after cooking, arranged in a proud fan of iridescent blue and green. The food is not just sustenance, it is symbolism. To serve a live-looking peacock, roasted, and then dressed again in its own skin and feathers, was a declaration. Look how powerful we are. Look how rare our pleasures. Look how we master beauty, even in death. And the spices so saffron, cinnamon, black pepper imported from lands so distant, they may as well have been mythical. Each pinch was wealth, each dusting, status. A noble's feast might have as many as 12 courses, some stretching over hours. Between platters came spiced wine, warm with honey and herbs, ale brewed thick and sweet, mead, claret. Goblets gleamed. Servants refilled them without request. Yet not all were dining. Behind the scenes, the great engine of labor churned in silence. In the kitchens below, it was hot, smoky, relentless. Dozens of hands turned spits, stirred cauldrons, plucked birds, and basted meats. There were no pauses. The rhythm was brutal. Every dish that shimmered on the Lord's table had passed through sweat and exhaustion. And there were other companions at the feasting scene, but very real. Fleas, lice, and mice thrived in the warmth. Sanitation was not a noble virtue. Trenches once soaked through with meat and gravy were often handed down to the poor, or left for animals. Grease stained the tablecloths, the rushes muffled spills, and the air while festive was thick with the human sense of perfume, oil, and long unwashed. Manners, though, were deadly serious. One did not tear bread with the teeth. One did not speak with a goblet raised. One must not lick one's fingers not until given permission, and most importantly, never reach beyond your station, not just in conversation or seating, but even in gesture. A misplaced hand could cost a man his favor or his fortune, because this was more than a feast. It was a negotiation. Beneath the laughter and jest, deals were struck, marriages proposed, land grants hinted at, feuds cooled or stoked. With a glance, a raised cup could signal alliance. A snubbed toast could breed quiet resentment that simmered for seasons. And above it all was spectacle. Jesters performed between courses. Minstrels plucked lyres or hummed ancient ballads. Some feasts even included pageant small theatrical performances, sometimes allegorical, sometimes. The goal was to dazzle, to impress, to remind all in attendance. You are beneath this roof because I allow it. For the noble class, hospitality was not merely kindness. It was currency, power, expressed in roast fowl and candied almonds, status measured in the length of a table or the glaze on a fig tart. And yet, even for the elite, there was unease beneath the velvet. Feasts could bankrupt a baron. A wedding banquet might require months of preparation, loans, and entire herds of livestock. The pressure to outshine one's peers was constant. To be outdone was to risk being forgotten. And in the medieval court, to be forgotten was to be replaced. So the candles kept burning, the goblets kept clinking, and the nobles, so far removed from the peasants in the fields, still feasted with the same urgency. An urgency not born of hunger, but of fear. The fear of as the last course faded, the marchpane, the sugared almonds, the gilded fruits, the hall dimmed, guests stumbled to bedchambers, servants collapsed into silence, and the echoes of clinking plates were replaced by snores and the creak of settling beams. And the next morning, the kitchen fires were lit again, because the feast was never truly finished. It was only paused.